The kitchen light was the only thing awake in the house. Not bright. Just that soft yellow glow above the stove that makes the room feel smaller at night. David stood barefoot on the cold tile floor with one hand resting lightly against the counter. The refrigerator hummed quietly behind him. Somewhere deeper in the house, the air conditioner clicked once and settled back into silence. He wasn't hungry. He wasn't even fully thirsty. He had only come into the kitchen for a sip of water before bed. The glass felt cool in his hand. The house was still. No television, no conversation, no traffic outside. And yet something inside him still felt active, not anxious, just unfinished. His body was tired enough to sleep. He could feel that clearly. His shoulders were heavy. His eyes burned slightly from the long day. Even his knees felt slower tonight. But his mind still seemed attached to the day somehow, as though part of him had forgotten to come home. He stood there for another few seconds after putting the glass down, staring at nothing in particular. And somewhere in the quiet, a thought arrived so gently, he almost missed it. Why does it feel like my body came to bed, but my mind stayed somewhere else? For many people after 65, this feeling does not appear dramatically. It does not announce itself as insomnia. It does not always look like tossing and turning, or waking up repeatedly through the night, or lying awake until 3 in the morning. Sometimes people still sleep 7 hours, sometimes 8, and yet they wake up feeling strangely untouched by rest. Not exhausted in an emergency kind of way, just unreplenished, as though sleep happened around them without ever fully reaching them. And over time, many older adults quietly begin believing this is simply aging, that this distance between sleep and restoration is normal. But sometimes the body is not missing sleep. Sometimes it is missing release. There is a difference between being unconscious and being restored. A person can close their eyes for hours while some deeper part of them continues standing guard. Sometimes the body stays alert long after the day has ended. Sometimes the nervous system never fully receives the message that nothing else is required tonight. And when that happens, sleep becomes lighter emotionally, even when it still exists physically. It's possible to sleep without ever fully arriving at rest. Tonight, we're not talking about how to fall asleep faster. We're not talking about sleep disorders or complicated health problems. We're talking about something quieter. The subtle ways the body continues monitoring the world long after the lights go out, and the equally subtle moments when it finally lets go. If you're someone who cares about emotional well-being, gentle health awareness, and the quiet changes that happen as we grow older, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Now let's enter the part of the night most people never notice. The room was already dark when Barbara finally turned off her bedside lamp. The digital clock beside her bed glowed softly in blue numbers. 11:42 p.m. The hallway light outside her bedroom cast a thin line beneath the door. The blankets were warm from where she had been sitting upright reading earlier. Everything was quiet enough to sleep, but after a few moments, she noticed herself listening. Not intentionally, just automatically. The refrigerator downstairs, a car door outside, the small shifting sound of the house settling. Her eyes were closed, but some part of her awareness remained standing near the entrance of the world. Still monitoring, still available, still lightly prepared to respond. And what's strange is that many people do not recognize this as wakefulness. Because technically, they are resting. They are lying still. Their breathing slows slightly. Their body appears calm. But internally, attention is still reaching outward. The nervous system has not fully stepped away from responsibility yet. Rest begins when the nervous system no longer feels responsible for the world around it. Barbara noticed her forehead first. Not pain, not tension exactly. Just a faint holding, as though the muscles above her eyes were still participating in the day. Then very quietly, almost by accident, her forehead softened. Not because she forced it to, because she finally stopped using it. And for a brief moment, the room felt farther away. The refrigerator became less important. The hallway light stopped mattering. For the first time that night, her body no longer felt assigned to the task of listening. Sometimes the body can only sleep after it realizes it no longer needs to protect awareness itself. And many older adults spend years carrying invisible alertness without realizing how exhausting it truly is, especially people who spent decades taking care of others. Parents, caregivers, workers who solved problems every day, people who learned to remain available at all times. The body remembers responsibility long after the responsibilities change. Barbara turned once beneath the blanket. The pillow adjusted softly beneath her head. And somewhere in the silence, something inside her stopped waiting for the next sound. The body can rest only after it no longer feels responsible. Richard used to believe he slept well because he fell asleep quickly. Most nights, he was asleep within 15 minutes. No racing thoughts, no major worries. But lately, mornings had started feeling strangely thin. He would wake up after 7 hours feeling as though his body had remained partially assembled through the night. Not fully relaxed, not fully restored. One evening, he noticed something unusual. After turning off the lamp, he closed his eyes and immediately began reviewing the day. Not consciously at first. Tiny, unfinished checks appeared quietly. Did he answer that message? Should he refill the prescription tomorrow? Did he leave the garage light on? None of these thoughts were emotionally intense. That was the strange part. His mind was not distressed. It was simply still performing its final inspection. As though part of him needed confirmation that the day had truly ended before allowing deeper rest. Many people after 65 experience this without recognizing it. The body enters bed, but awareness remains near the doorway of the day. Eyes closed, mind still checking. And because the thoughts are small, they often go unnoticed. But small thoughts can still keep the nervous system gently engaged. Your eyes can close, while your awareness keeps standing guard. Richard shifted slightly beneath the blanket and noticed his jaw. Not clenched tightly, just barely engaged, as though some small part of him was still holding language itself. Then, during one slow breath, his jaw loosened without effort. His tongue settled lower inside his mouth. And suddenly the room felt quieter from the inside. Not externally quieter, internally quieter. The difference mattered, because real rest is not created by silence alone. It begins when the body no longer feels required to supervise reality. For the first time that night, Richard stopped checking whether the day had finished. And instead, his body quietly accepted that it already had. He wasn't fighting sleep. He was postponing surrender. Thomas lay perfectly still for almost 20 minutes. The ceiling fan rotated slowly overhead, creating soft shadows across the room each time the hallway light shifted outside. His wife beside him was already asleep. The mattress dipped slightly toward her side. Everything looked peaceful, but inside his body there was still effort. Very small effort, the kind most people never notice. His shoulders were still lifted slightly away from the mattress. One calf remained faintly tight. Even his hands rested with a trace of readiness. Not fear, not stress, just unfinished holding. And this is one of the quietest forms of wakefulness. When the body appears calm, but still hasn't fully released structural control. Many older adults have spent decades carrying themselves through responsibility, schedules, caregiving, financial worry, grief, adaptation, uncertainty. Over time, the muscles themselves begin learning vigilance. The body cannot fully restore itself while part of it still feels on duty. Thomas remembered hearing once that some military pilots used relaxation rituals before sleep. Not to force unconsciousness, not to hack the brain, but to communicate safety to the body, to help it understand. Nothing else is required from you tonight. That thought stayed with him, not as a technique, as permission. He noticed his shoulders again. Then very gradually, almost invisibly, they lowered deeper into the mattress. And something emotional happened in that moment. Not dramatic, just deeply human. For the first time that night, his shoulders stopped listening for tomorrow. His hands softened next. The muscles around his ribs released slightly. And suddenly the bed no longer felt like a place where he was preparing for another day. It felt like somewhere he was finally allowed to stop carrying one. Sometimes exhaustion is not the absence of sleep, but the absence of release. Susan noticed it most in her breathing. Not during the day. At night. Especially during the first few minutes after turning out the light. She would lie there quietly beneath the blanket, listening to the soft ticking sound of the ceiling vent, waiting for sleep to arrive. But her breathing never seemed to fully settle on its own. It remained slightly supervised, slightly managed, as though her body still hadn't trusted itself enough to disappear into rest completely. This happens more often than many people realize, especially after years of living in a world that constantly required awareness. Appointments, children, phone calls, bills, schedules, unexpected losses, health concerns. Even after retirement, the nervous system sometimes continues behaving as though vigilance is still necessary, and so the breath remains lightly guarded, not panicked, just monitored. Susan turned onto her side and pulled the blanket slightly closer beneath her chin. The room was cool. She could hear the distant hum of a neighbor's television through the wall. Then something small changed. During one exhale, she stopped trying to breathe correctly. She simply let the breath leave fully, a little slower, a little longer. And for one quiet moment, her body stopped performing rest and began entering it. There is a difference. One is observation, the other is surrender. The body often follows the breath not because breathing is magical, but because exhaling tells the nervous system that guarding may no longer be necessary. Her chest softened slightly into the mattress. Her stomach released. And somewhere inside her, urgency loosened its grip. Rest is not always the moment sleep begins. Sometimes, rest begins the moment the body no longer feels required to stay prepared. The body restores itself most deeply when it finally believes the night is safe. Charles always noticed the final stage, that strange moment right before sleep fully arrived. The room would already feel distant. His thoughts would slow. His eyes would grow heavy. And yet there was still one last layer of waiting inside him, as though some quiet internal voice kept saying, "Not yet." He couldn't explain it. Nothing was wrong. He wasn't afraid. But some small part of him still hesitated at the edge of complete release. Many people experience this without language for it. The body becomes sleepy, while awareness remains slightly unwilling to disappear completely, not because danger is present, because vigilance became familiar. For decades, many people learned that staying mentally available was part of survival itself. And the body does not abandon old responsibilities quickly, even in darkness, even in silence, even in safety. Charles lay there listening to the soft buzzing sound of the digital alarm clock beside the bed. The blankets were twisted lightly around his legs. Moonlight rested faintly against the bedroom wall. Then he noticed his mouth. The muscles around his jaw were still faintly holding. So quietly he almost missed it. And without trying to sleep better, he allowed the jaw to loosen slightly. Nothing dramatic happened. No instant sleep. No transformation. But internally, it felt like standing down from watch duty, like a guard quietly leaving his post after a very long shift. And suddenly, the pressure to monitor sleep itself disappeared. He stopped checking whether he was asleep yet, stopped waiting for unconsciousness, stopped evaluating the night. And only then did his body begin drifting naturally away from wakefulness. Sometimes people cannot rest because they are still observing themselves trying to rest. The deepest forms of restoration often begin after self-monitoring ends. He wasn't resisting sleep. He was waiting for permission to stop holding himself together. Jessica woke briefly around 2 in the morning, not fully awake, just enough to notice the room. The red numbers on the clock, the faint glow beneath the bathroom door, the sound of rain outside, and immediately her awareness activated, not with anxiety, with attendance, as though her nervous system had quietly resumed duty the moment consciousness returned. This is something many older adults understand deeply, but rarely discuss. The body becomes tired, but awareness becomes practiced, especially after years of caregiving, problem-solving, adapting, enduring. People learn how to remain mentally present even while exhausted, and eventually the body forgets how to fully disappear into rest. Jessica shifted carefully beneath the blankets so she wouldn't wake herself more completely. Then she noticed something. Her neck muscles were still lightly engaged, her shoulders slightly lifted. Even now, even here, even in the middle of the night. So gently, she barely realized she was doing it. She allowed the pillow to hold more of her weight. And something softened emotionally inside her. Not sadness, relief. The kind of relief that appears when the body realizes it no longer needs to maintain posture against the world. For the first time that night, her nervous system stopped asking if someone still needed her. And that is often the hidden exhaustion many older adults carry into sleep. Not insomnia, responsibility residue, the emotional habit of remaining available. The body rests most deeply after it no longer feels emotionally assigned to tomorrow. Joseph once believed rest came automatically with age, that eventually the body would simply become tired enough to surrender naturally. But one quiet winter night, lying beside the soft hum of the heater vent, he realized something different. Tiredness and release were not the same thing. His body was exhausted, but some small part of him was still waiting, still listening, still prepared, still holding the edges of consciousness together. Then he remembered something simple he had heard years earlier. Not a sleep trick, not a performance strategy, just a gentle idea that sometimes the body needs a ritual of disengagement, not to force sleep, to communicate safety. Nothing else is required from you tonight. Joseph lay still for a moment longer. Then slowly, almost imperceptibly, his face softened. His tongue rested lower. His breathing lengthened naturally. His shoulders released downward into the mattress. And the room changed, not physically, relationally. The night no longer felt like something he needed to manage. It finally felt like somewhere he could arrive. And perhaps this is the subtle sign many people mistake for aging fatigue. Not that the body forgot how to sleep, but that it never fully received the signal that the day was over. Sometimes, the most exhausted people are not the ones who stay awake. They are the ones who continue carrying wakefulness into sleep itself. So if you have ever woken after a full night in bed and still felt emotionally unfinished, if you have ever noticed your body resting while your awareness remained quietly alert, if you have ever felt too tired to continue the day, yet somehow still unable to fully let go of it, you are not broken, and your body may not need more effort. It may simply need less guarding, less monitoring, less preparation, less internal responsibility. The military sleep technique is often described as a way to fall asleep quickly, but perhaps its deeper meaning is gentler than that. Perhaps it is simply a ritual that helps the body understand. You no longer need to hold everything together tonight. You do not need to supervise the darkness. You do not need to remain prepared. You do not need to keep checking whether rest has arrived yet. Sometimes healing begins the moment the body realizes it is finally allowed to stop performing readiness. And maybe that is why certain tiny moments matter so much. The forehead softening, the jaw releasing, the shoulders lowering, the longer exhale. Not because these things cause sleep, but because they quietly communicate something the nervous system has been waiting to hear all day. The shift from vigilance into permission, from monitoring into trust, from staying available into finally leaving the day behind. Have you ever felt like your body was exhausted, but something inside you was still quietly staying awake? If this video resonated with you, take a moment to like the video, share your experience in the comments, and subscribe to the channel for more gentle conversations about aging, rest, emotional well-being, and the quiet changes many people experience after 60. Thank you for spending this peaceful moment here tonight. And wherever you are right now, wishing you a night where your mind no longer feels responsible for holding everything together, and your body finally feels safe enough to rest.